So, hello and welcome to Blueprint Cymru, a podcast bringing ideas, experience and ambition to the conversation of building a better future for Wales. My name is Simon Hobson. In today's episode, I'm joined by Amy Nicholas, Green Party of Wales candidate and number one on the list for the constituency of Ceredigion Penfro. And this is for the Senedd elections that are coming on the 7th of May this year. Amy lives in rural West Wales, where she is committed to community life and passionate about ensuring small businesses, farmers and families can thrive. She is particularly focused on rural public transport. Today, we're going to have a conversation about communities in Wales's countryside, green politics, economic resilience, transport, and what it means to stand for election at a pivotal moment for our nation. It's great to have you on the podcast, Amy, so welcome.
Sure.
Perhaps we could start by, as I do with all guests to Blueprint Cymru, just having a little chat about your childhood, where you were brought up. I always ask people the importance of the Welsh language to them and how you got to where you are as a candidate for the Green Party.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on. So I grew up in southeast England, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm not from Wales originally. And we were one of these families that came to Wales on holiday. So we never went abroad. We actually came to this beautiful part of the world in West Wales, pretty much for all our holidays when I was growing up. So I've had a literally a lifelong connection, even though I haven't grown up here. I moved here 5 years ago to West Wales from Bristol during the COVID era. I was only supposed to be here for a few months, but I completely fell in love with this community where I am, and the access to nature, being able to swim in the sea. I've positioned myself very well to live the kind of lifestyle I want, so that I can have a 15-minute bike ride to my market garden to get fresh organic food, or to the local high street to shop locally in small businesses, or to the beach, or to the wildlife centre where I can go and watch birds in the Tywing marshes. And so, yeah, and I'm easily connected to the bus station. So I can also then connect to some of the biggest towns and stuff. So to me, it's a perfect location because I want to live a most sustainable lifestyle as I can. And it's getting increasingly difficult to do that in some cities, as well as have connection to nature. So that's kind of why I've stayed. I've then gone on to work for Aberystwyth University on something called the Transport and Health Integrated Research Network. So that's meant that I've been really able to explore how different agencies and communities connect across Wales. That was a Wales-wide project, also connecting into other parts of the UK and the world. And then when that project funding ended, I'm now working for Together for Change, which is an organisation where I support communities to do research on things they care about to make a difference in that community. And that's across rural Wales specifically. So, yeah, I've got this kind of feeling of being really loving being here because of the nature, because of the fact that I can walk through my village and people say, hi, bonda, and have a little chat with you. And you just feel like you're not invisible. It can be so easy to be invisible in a city. And I got to a point in my life where I wanted to feel connecting. It was feeling like the world was getting a bit scary even 5 years ago. Things were changing. Even if we hadn't have had COVID, it might have been a similar shift for my life. So it felt like a good time to be here and then kind of engaging in the way that I do. And I have an allotment, so I can just walk 10 minutes to my allotment as well, which is lovely. And so dwi'n dysgu Cymraeg. The Welsh language is really important to me. I have family who live here as well. They're not involved in politics, so I don't really want to talk about them, but I have family who are Welsh speakers. So I want to learn for them. Also, this fantastic push for the Welsh Government actually to get more Welsh speakers. It means as an incomer here, you really feel like you need to embrace the language to be able to have opportunities in the job market, which is really great to keep the language alive. But I have recently heard that quite a lot of the language has now become quite academic. It's become quite in schools, in business, and not kept so alive in community. So there is something there where I'm trying to be braver at speaking it more in community as my confidence grows. So yeah, I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's actually interesting with the language. As a mining engineer, I was educated at Campbell School of Mines in Penryn, in Cornwall, and we had a great mining captain who managed our university mine, and he was one of the very few Cornish speakers. And I remember him saying how much he admired Wales and rural Wales for keeping it alive and keeping the language relevant. And he actually went and learnt a great deal of Welsh in order to inject that into the Cornish language and help, revive Cornish so that it could become a useful, practical language rather than, as you were saying, more of an academic 1600s type language and having words that can be used in the modern world. So I'm quite interested in something you said there about always being connected to Wales with the family, and particularly rural Wales. What is it about rural Wales and the countryside of Wales that you find you can't leave behind?
It's something about the speed. So when I lived in the city, it was very rush. And it was something, so a friend of mine was the one who encouraged me to move to the village where I am. And when I was first moved here, she's like, you've got to get on local time. You've got to just slow it down a bit and not expect things to happen super fast or whatever. So that's not to say that things don't happen when you need to happen. It's not that dramatic.
I thought Bristol was quite a chilled place itself.
To a degree. It's just that there's it's just a different vibe. It's kind of, I don't feel like there's so much pressure to fill so many things. Not that there isn't a lot to do. Where I live, there is a lot to do. There's a lot of culture stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff theatre-wise, music-wise, food-wise. So it's not, there is quite a lot of that opportunity. And I know that's not the case for quite a lot of the region. There isn't so much diversity of things to do and experience and people to meet as there are in the sort of bubble where I am a bit, which does feel a bit like bringing the diversity of a city to the rural area. So that's quite cool. But I just like the openness and the nature, and I'm a fan of weather.
Well,
so I think
probably visit Quebec then.
Well, maybe.
You like it, temperatures of -20 in the winter and +40 in the summer.
Yeah, maybe not that much weather. I'm kind of like a middling weather, but yeah, I don't know. I like being in the elements. I like being outside. I love the fact that you can walk the hedgerows, not literally in them, but enjoy them, see the wildlife, breathe fresh air.
Yeah,
definitely feels like in rural Wales that you have that, and big views, big open views. There's something, a lot of research around why nature is important to people, that it's calming, it helps with nervous system regulation, it helps you to feel positive and upbeat, and they're still exploring why that is. So there might be lots of things about why I love being in West Wales because of the openness, the landscape, the sort of calm sense of things to do, but don't have to rush so much. And it is quite interesting when it's this tourist season, the change in vibe, because it's busier and because the people are coming with a different attitude of rushing and a sense of entitlement and a sense of get out of my way. I'm in a hurry. I'm only here for a short space of time. Whereas everyone's just chill, just reverse gently. No need to panic. All these kind of things that you feel the difference. And I think maybe I was just living in that difference constantly. And now I get the option to live a sort of more chilled existence. That's the best way I can explain it.
And what was it, that connection to nature, which it sounds like you've always had? Was that what brought you to green politics? Yeah,
definitely. It was the environment and climate change issues for sure. I decided I was going to be vegetarian when I was about 9. I read a book called Animal Kind and some other books around nature and extinction. And I thought that that was something I could do. I'm definitely the kind of person, I read something, I hear something, I have information, I want to do something about it. I'm not just going to sit with that. I'm going to do something. And that started young. So my parents supported me through that, even though they weren't vegetarian themselves. And I think ever since then, my ears have just been pricked to the challenges of the environment and nature, and caring about, you know, from when I was little, like frogs and birds and hedgehogs, and as you get older, you hear about more exotic animals, and the destruction of the rainforest was very topical in the 90s when I was a teenager. Yes. And you know, back then you were like, whatever it was, the side of a football pitch disappearing from the rainforest every second or whatever it was. And I'm incredulous there's any left because it's still being destroyed, although there has been some improvements in some places. So it's been going on for a long time, my awareness, I think it is. And as I've got older, as I've learned, like, where you invest your money, where your pension's invested, every pound that you spend on something, you can choose whether it's ethical or not ethical if you have that awareness. And now, as soon as I have the awareness, I have to make that choice. I can't ignore this happening. And then it became things that are not wrapped in plastic. And then it became, you know, when I had a choice about driving, I chose to leave learning to drive quite late in life because I wanted to rely on public transport and cycling and everything. And then living in West Wales, I realised you really do need access to a vehicle. There's not the population density is the argument for there being enough public services in terms of transport. And having lived in much more built up areas, not all the time, lived in Hereford for a while, there's definitely an ease of access to things, and gives you so many more choices in life when you can, it's closer by to get to things. And so you didn't need a car so much, but here I do rely on lifts occasionally. My life revolves around bus timetables is the best way I can describe it. I'm lucky that the bus station near me, I mean, it's called a bus station. It has a few bus stops. It's not really a bus station per se. It has some bike lockups. So occasionally I can lock my bike there before I got. So there's a tiny bit of integrated transport going on there. But essentially there's a lack of joined upness around the transport side. So that's then become my more recent thing that I'm campaigning on. I've become aware of a much more of a challenge in rural places like rural Wales and other parts of rural England and Scotland than it is in city areas. So I found this out, I discovered this, so I got involved, and I've been part of the Ceredigion bus action campaign, and my job was focused on these kind of things. So yeah, so nature, care for nature, connection to nature, and the fact that I think fundamentally I believe that what we collectively do to nature, we're doing to ourselves. Firstly, because we are nature, there is no separateness. And secondly, there is no away. There's this sense of throwing something away, but it comes back. Like I just, that's fundamentally how I see things, is that we are amongst it all. We can't just say we're going to close that door and over here it's going to be nice and safe for humans and we're separate, and over here is nature and it can just have horrible things happen to it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. Humans are not other to the natural world. And, you know, as a mining engineer, I'm very aware of that. And one of the things that you brought up there, which was at the very beginning of that conversation, is you talked about becoming a vegetarian. And I've a sister who became vegetarian and then subsequently dropped it as a way of life. But I do have friends and cousins that become vegans, and I've had long conversations with them, and I fully support and see the arguments for why one would choose to do that. And I think many people do. But the problem for the majority of people, I believe, certainly for myself, is it's quite hard to maintain that. And you also have, you know, strength of will, isn't it? Like to be able to go into a shop, check all the ingredients, know what you're buying, make things. And then you've just got the natural human condition of, oh, I quite fancy having a bit of bacon, or I quite fancy a bit of cheese. So if you were to argue, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, if you were to argue that maybe that's a better way for majority of people to live their lives, how do we go about educating people, as you say, making that information aware? You've made these life choices because you became aware of situations and information. And presumably all that information is out there for everybody to find, but you have to be a particular type of person to go and look for it. So how do we make it a bit easier for people to go and look for it, and to have it put in front of them even?
Yeah. It's a very good question, and something where I've tried to learn about behavior change and how you support people to make informed choices that they feel empowered to kind of follow through on. And that might be something as simple as some of the things we've learned about encouraging people to exercise. How can that be transferred to kind of other sustainable ways of living, for example? And so a lot of that is about making the better choice, however you're framing that, as the easier one. So that as you're transitioning from one to another, you're making it little bite-sized things. So a classic one is like, if you want to do more running, you keep your running shoes nice and ready by the front door and all your kit ready to go, and you've kind of got a sense of where you can do it in your day. And so you're reducing the barriers for somebody to do a change. When I decided to be vegetarian, there was obviously quite a few barriers. I had to persuade my parents. I didn't have agency over what I was buying. But as an adult, you have so many more freedoms. Like now, around the world, it is so much easier to be vegetarian or even vegan than it ever has been before, because there's been a movement for change. There's so many options. To be fair, there's quite a lot of overly processed, probably quite unhealthy, ultra-processed food versions of some of these things, meat-free things, which also have sometimes got a negative environmental impact. So you do also, there's a sort of education around that as well. But yeah, I mean, food is political. Food is comfort, it's security, it's memory, it's togetherness, it's sharing. So when you're trying to have discussions about, okay, so what is the most ethical way for us to have this meal, people can get very defensive, because you're not just asking them to make a very factual based choice. You're asking them to really sort of question their memories and maybe connections to family members, and asking them to let go of some of those things, whether people are consciously aware of that or not. But we always have our sort of comfort foods.
Well, absolutely agree. Just think here in Canada, you know, how protected the dairy industry is, same in the US with the farming sector, and then vice versa. It would seem, coming from a farming family, that in the UK, the Westminster government is quite happy to throw rural communities and farmers under the bus anytime it suits them politically. Personal view there. I think, you know, just to reiterate your point there, emotionally, because I feel like it's better if I try to live a vegan diet, but emotionally, my family are all dairy farmers. So I think, I'm betraying the family, you know, the generations that have spent the husbandry of the cattle and the breeds. And, you know, some of my family have had some quite rare breeds. So then I think, from that side of things, you know, if everybody turns to become vegan, do all these breeds become extinct? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about it a lot deeper than most people, but I can see what you're saying about the emotional attachment to food.
Yeah, and what you're saying there about thinking deeply, it would be great if on this sort of topic in particular and several others, where the evidence is desperately showing us that we need to reduce the meat consumption that we have from a kind of mathematical carbon balancing perspective, I think the government should be facilitating those broader discussions about what that means, because there are ways of farming meat and dairy that reduce the carbon methane impacts quite significantly. So we could be escalating learnings from one farm to another about that, so that when people are maybe thinking carefully about where they source their meat or dairy from, they're able to have a choice that is the most ethical. And we've collectively said that we think that is a legitimate sort of way of producing the food that we collectively still think we should be eating. because it's minimized its negative impact, both to nature, but also to the creatures involved in that scenario. So yeah, I think there's sort of quite a bit of facilitated self-reflection as a group within the nation, whatever that might look like. But there's lots of examples around citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies, participatory democracy, where you can have frank, held, safe conversations where we talk about, actually, that is a loss for me to give up my cheese or my milk or my yogurt, because, you know, we talk about how yogurt's good for your gut. Cheese is got lots of chemicals in it, which are quite comforting for you. There's all these kind of things that we know from science about why food makes people feel the way they do. How can we kind of use that information transparently without manipulating people, and just say, what do we want for ourselves, for the world? What do we want to be as a society? What things do we value? And yes, maybe we valued these other things before. We don't need to throw the baby out of the bathwater, as the horrible saying goes. You know, there's lots of us. There's a really strong connection to land that I love about Wales. I can't come in and now say, oh, let's just change all of that. That would be sort of hypocritical.
Do you think that this is very much, I guess, an educated elite conversation? And the reason I say that, if I imagine myself as a parent with 2 children and I've got 10 quid a day to spend on feeding my children, might I think, well, it's all well and good, and yeah, I see the point of that, but actually I'm just surviving here. I've got to feed my children, and if this buy one get one free and has got horrible things in it, or is not good for the environment, I don't really want to buy it, but I haven't really got a choice economically. So how does one tackle that? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. It's a massive issue, and we used to collectively spend a much greater proportion of our income on food, just generally, compared to other things. It's just that other things bucket has become bigger, and the fact that we have to spend so much more on rent or mortgages now than maybe we did proportionally before, and transport and gadgets and whatever else the modern society requires, means that proportion we spend on food has gone down. So that's just the context we need to be aware of, that we have devalued what we think we should be spending on food generally. We also historically would have had an understanding that chicken wasn't just a kind of nugget wrapped in breadcrumbs from a freezer. It was an animal that had lived a life, had its life ended. It was cut up into pieces. It was served, but often you would have commonly a matriarch, but somebody in the family that would cook that singular chicken, and you'd have it for maybe a week and a half, used in different things, and every part of it might be used. And that whole mindset has changed. And so we have to remember where we've come from to where we've got to, and who's benefiting from where we've got to. That is going to be corporations taking lots of money, making a lot of profit over something that is stored for a long time on a shelf or in a freezer, travels goodness knows where in the world, hasn't got a lot of nutrition in it. So that's where a government can come in and support a stronger connection between producers locally, that I can see very much outside my window now, with local people, especially those who don't have affordable access to nutritious food, to get access to that. I'm actually, my colleague is working with a community in North Wales at the moment, exploring that exact theme. Can we use vouchers? So rather than using a financial support mechanism to only be spent in a supermarket, can it be spent with local farmers for nutritious food? Can more people be like Keg and a Bobble, amazing organisations like that, supporting people to learn how to cook from a very young age, from a family perspective? There is a well-known phenomenon. So even if you were to give families on low income like a really healthy food box, not just leftovers from a supermarket they don't want anymore, highly packaged, ultra processed, like raw food, to cook food, they might not have a cabinet full of ingredients to do something. So it's helping those families also have your spices and your herbs and your salts and the frying pans and those kind of things. So I'm aware that there needs to be a holistic discussion and enabling of people so that that isn't the case, that they feel like the cheapest option is the most unhealthy option, and also it's unhealthy for the planet as well as that family. But there's a lot to it. It's not swapping one in out. There's at the moment, farmers are not being paid enough for what they produce anyway. The supermarkets are creaming off so much, so still profiting in a cost of living crisis. That is somehow legally allowed to function in this country, which to me, I'm astonished that that's a thing. At the same time as farmland, the environment around it could be much healthier in terms of nature bounce back. Families could be much healthier in terms of their health and well-being. And yet the only thing that's healthy is the supermarket pockets. And that is not okay. That can definitely be addressed.
So this might seem like a daft question with having seen the passion that you've answered some of these questions, but what has brought you to decide to stand for the Senedd this May? And what does that step mean for you personally? Are you having to take a step back from other parts of your life and cut things out of your life and people? What does that? Because obviously most people don't stand for elections, and most people I don't really know what it involves. So perhaps you could look into explain a bit of that.
Yeah, that has been very eye-opening. And it's only really the start of the journey. The full ramping up of the election hasn't quite happened yet, because we're currently in the end of February. So it's a balancing act. The incredible surge in the Green Party membership since Zach Polanski as the leader has come in has really helped us to build a team. It's completely impossible to do this work without an amazing team, and a massive shout out to people like Ellie, my campaign manager, and Robbie and Chris and James and Carolyn, and lots of incredible people who are, and our other candidates like TJ and Morgan, who we work as a team. And I have incredible support from friends and family, and that's what makes it work. And it's quite good in that sense, is that all of the projects that I work on paid employment wise, it's about helping teams function. It's about how do you support people to work together better. It's not always straightforward. We're all working voluntarily doing this. I do try and work full time as well, but I do help to run a repair cafe where I live, and trying to step back from some of the things around that to a degree. Still doing quite a little bit. Probably the thing I've stood back most from, ironically, is spending time in nature and doing sport and activity, because I love walking and cycling and paddleboarding and sea swimming and stuff like that, and I haven't been able to do so much of that.
So as if you're canvassing, there's a lot of doors to go around. But actually, from a practical electioneering point of view, as a Green, presumably you would rather not be putting lots of bits of paper through people's doors, ideally, but you've got to presume some of that in order to get the message across. So how does that work?
Yeah, well, it is possible to get printing that is 100% recycled paper and sort of like ethical plant-based inks and stuff like this, and recycle anything that you don't use. Historically, and it still is the case compared to other parties, the Green Party have had next to no coverage outside of our own leafleting through doors. It's a completely new thing now, really, that we have the level of exposure that Zach Polanski has enabled us to have. So people have a sense of maybe some of our general messages, but those general messages UK-wide aren't necessarily the powers that the Senedd has at a devolved level. So we can't do wealth tax as an obvious one, for example. So we do still need to get those leaflets through.
I just was thinking of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of the way the Green Party works. So you've got Anthony Slaughter, who leads the party within Wales.
Yes.
Is that correct? So then how does that dynamic work with Zach Polanski and the way that messaging is disseminated?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but
okay. Well, I was just thinking. So again, I'm coming at this as a non-party member. So, but if Zach Polanski's, as you said, he's got some very good UK-wide coverage since he's become leader and really helped bolster the membership of the Green Party across the UK. Anthony Slaughter's the head of the Greens campaign and the party within Wales.
Yeah.
Presumably, as you were just saying, the Senedd has certain powers which have devolved to it, which don't necessarily equate to what Zach Belansky's saying the Greens would do for the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I just was wondering that how does one as a candidate go about helping the electorate understand the difference?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Quite a lot of people don't fully understand, and this is a fault, I think, on the Welsh Government for not educating people enough. I think there is a push for more education about devolved powers in Wales, hopefully soon, in the run-up to this Senedd election. Yeah, I mean, helping people understand what is and isn't devolved, you know, so things like education and NHS, things around, obviously the Welsh language is probably straightforward, youth services, council services, not policing, not military, and for the most part, not tax raising. There are some tax raising powers, there's some that could be leveraged a bit more, but yeah, for the most part, it's not something that we can control. So that would be something we could explain on the door, we can explain in leaflets, we can explain in little videos that I'm trying to do more on social media, trying to get used to social media. So that's sort of on us and every political party to help people understand that when they go and vote on the 7th of May for the party that they want, what actually those parties can do versus what UK government has control over. And I think it's not really a full democracy if people don't understand how their democracy works. And that's also on the press to help people understand. I'm under the impression that, well, I've been told that some people in Aberystwyth have been getting leaflets, seemingly from the Welsh Government, explaining the Senedd election coming up, explaining the changes. I've not had any where I live. I don't know people this side of the region that have had those. So obviously there are some efforts being made, but we haven't quite seen them. So yeah, I would explain to them the difference in powers. We're obviously, like most parties, finalising our manifesto specifically, but we're looking at key asks around that aren't too dissimilar. I mean, we're still talking about nationalising the water company Dŵr Cymru here, which will be impactful even more so in England. And we're talking about restoring nature in many, many, many different ways. There's lots of campaigns like Save the Tybee campaign where I am, Save the Clydau, or the Clydau project in Pembrokeshire, people very much caring about and connected to nature because they see it a lot here and they want to see improvements. We might not have the same sort of litter and air pollution challenges that other parts of Wales might have. For example, Cardiff and Swansea and Wrexham might have different challenges that we have. But we have coastal litter in the form of waste washing up on our shores. So it's just same but different, I suppose, really.
And
yeah.
What does restoring nature mean? Is that one and the same as rewilding or something different?
Probably because there's a spectrum. So rewilding isn't going to work everywhere and it's not going to be appropriate everywhere. There is nature-friendly farming. There is making sure that our rivers are, first of all, stopping being polluted, but then trying to get them up to what their full capacity could be. What could they be possible? So there's fantastic stories of how there was so much salmon on the Avon Tavy that you could walk across it and things like this, like the coracle, salmon farmers, fishing farmers. So there was so much abundance before that is clearly historically remembered by local people that isn't present. How do we not just stop the pollution now at the levels it's at now, but help to restore it to what its potential capacity could be? So we have lots of beautiful birds flying around, lots of fish and amphibians in the sea. It's not just making it less bad. It's really about restoring it. But that restoration might look different in different places where it's relevant.
And yeah, because one of the reasons I asked that question is I know from farming communities and some rural communities can feel like they haven't been consulted and quite offended by sort of rewilding plans and conversations that seem to happen at high levels, and don't ask them how that's going to affect their lives. And I think that sort of leads me on to sort of more general question of how do you get people to come along with environmental ideas and policy when there is often the impression that they can be quite restrictive on your way of living, the history of your family farm, or you've got a particular rural business that's just getting going, or maybe just about making money for you, and you think, oh well, I don't want another level of bureaucracy on top of my business, and so people can maybe be naturally against more environmental, as I would see it, restrictive measures. How does one address that and bring people along for that journey?
Well, listening is the start. You've got to go to people where people are at, not expect them to come to you. You've got to find out their experiences, how they've maybe seen things change, how maybe they want things to be, and say, well, actually, have you heard about this? Did you hear this person over here did this great thing? And it actually wasn't as bad as you're thinking it is. And fund them to go and visit that maybe other farm or visit that other business that's done it differently. I used to work on something called Go Green when I lived in Bristol, and that was when they had a European Green Capital year. There was funding to bring together, we worked with 1,000 businesses over about the space of a year to help them to understand what their options were to be more sustainable across Bristol. Now, Bristol, you may or may not be aware, is a city that already does quite a lot on sustainability. So once those businesses were aware what was available to them, which is what we provided, they had peer-to-peer learning. So they might have business breakfast, they might be able to do a tour. So they could basically ask someone similar to themselves. It wasn't a top-down academic, completely not from their realm of understanding, who was telling them, thou shalt do this, it's very important that you do that. That's not how it's ever going to work, and that doesn't seem very logical, really. The idea is that they learn from each other. We want to keep and we want to encourage entrepreneurial spirit. We want people to be able to kind of stay living where they've grown up. We have a massive leakage of young people leaving Wales, brain drain, people often call it, because quite rightly, anybody might want to move. I'd moved loads of different times for different opportunities, work-wise or culturally. So absolutely everyone has the right to do that. But if they want to come back or they want to stay, there needs to be a way to support them to have an idea, to run with the idea. It might be that it can be set up as a social enterprise. It might be that they need guidance so it doesn't have to be a negative impact on society and the environment. And it's just about making that information available to people. So I'm definitely not of the perspective that you need to talk down to people and assume that you know better than them. I think it's a conversation. I think it's a meeting in the middle, especially around farming, because farmers know the land, they've seen it change, and they might have a good sense of what needs to happen there, but they've been incentivized potentially for decades to do things a certain way, but it's having a two-way conversation.
And so sort of getting towards the end of our conversation, so you're number one on the list, which gives you a fair chance in the current polling of Green Party in Wales. And if you were elected to the Senedd on the 7th of May, what, at the end of that term, would success look like for you personally? What would you want to achieve as a member of the Senedd? Well,
there's things that's really frustrated me around things like Swift bricks not being tackled, things where we haven't stopped different types of bottom trawling, it's called generically, in marine protected areas. Now, I've read some of the committee notes from these conversations, and essentially they've kicked it down the can and they've said, well, we'll leave this to the next Senedd to decide. So given that within a term, essentially you've got to onboard a bit, then they'll be campaigning for the next election towards the end of some of that. What you can actually achieve is basically not the full 4 years, but maybe 3.5 years, maybe, once you got up to speed and everything. So what can you achieve in that time? I think there's lots of stuff that was on the table that was parked that we can just pick up and run with. And, there's lots of progressive people in the Welsh Senedd hopefully going to be there that can hopefully come to some kind of agreement to work with those things to show that we can work collaboratively, we can get things done and get things done quickly. The Greens in Scotland, they showed that you can get things like the Swift bricks for all new developments done, and it's happened, and things like having cheap fares for young people, more cheap fares for young people, more cheap fares for everybody around public transport in particular. So there are things that I think you don't need to drag out long committee discussions for, that you can actually get done. I'd like to see more opportunities to try this theory I have of listening to people, collaborating people to design things differently. Often it's said that there is a barrier to more collaborative co-production working because it's expensive. But I have worked, for example, with Co-Production Wales and various other organisations that are looking at co-designing policy, co-designing how policy gets enacted on the ground. And so I do know that there's plenty of networks and people out there who've got some great ideas that we can just sort of start replicating because they're well evidenced and well funded. We don't need to start from scratch again. There's incredible examples of success across Wales that we can bring to Ceredigion Penfro, for example. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about what we can do. I'm going in very energized. I've got loads of ideas, a big, massive network of people who I know I can just call in to advise us, and lots of community groups who are telling me on the ground what is needed. And so I think potentially there's a good amount that could get done if we're not too held up in lots of chatting about things endlessly.
Thank you. And finally, then, I ask all my guests of Blueprint Cymru this question: what's your vision? Where would you like Cymru to be? And that to be could be economically, constitutionally, environmentally, whichever you would like to talk about in the next 15 years. What would be a good place for Wales to be in?
Wow, the next 15 years. I think we want to, those things I've talked about in terms of people feeling they have more agency over decision making, the people having more faith in politics, not just the politics of people who elect and go and sit in the Senedd, but this idea of decision making and decision making collectively. Really want to see that we are really close to hitting that net zero target. It's so urgent and so important now to tackle the climate emergency and nature biodiversity crisis. And I think the way that we go about that could bring lots of other benefits. So if you go about that well over the next 10, 15 years, you will be bringing high quality, well-paid jobs in those sectors to Wales. You will be addressing some of the issues we've talked around access to food and cost of living crisis. You will be able to address the cost of living crisis around energy costs if you're bringing in renewables in a smart way. So there's lots of things where actually my drive around fears around climate emergency and nature crisis, we can address those things in a way that also benefits your day-to-day experiences as someone living in Wales. So that's the vision I would like to see, is that people are really already proud about being Welsh, about even me as an incomer, I'm proud about living in Wales and what Wales can achieve. I mean, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act should be the golden thread through every single decision. Every single decision should be about what is the impact going to be on young people? What is the impact going to be on nature? We need to have nature and future generations that are currently young now at the heart of every decision. And if that was normalized in the next 15 years, it would be a really exciting place to live. And I think people would be coming here. They would be coming here to fill those jobs that we can't fill currently around the doctors and nurses and dentists and the bus drivers and stuff like that. Those jobs that we feel like we don't fill, and so they create a gap in our public service provision. If we make Wales a really vibrant, exciting place to be, because we have that flexibility, and if we do it well, there's so much beauty, so much resource, so much imagination, so much history, and the kind of rich culture of Cymraeg. I think it's I think it's it's a strong, positive vision. That's what I'm seeing.
That's fantastic. And obviously, you've just getting going with the campaigning. So people in your community will no doubt see you about more than they already do. Have you any public speaking upcoming events? And you mentioned that you're just getting used to social media. So could listeners find you on social media anywhere?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Amy Nicholas on Instagram, and I will be at various hustings, which I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to be at Pembrokeshire College on the 2nd of March. That's the one I can remember. And there's an event in Aberystwyth. There's a showing of the Ocean film that I'm going to be on a panel for, which is on Thursday next week. And yes, there's lots of others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, if you go to the Ceredigion or the Pembrokeshire Green Party websites, there's all manner of ways to contact me on there. And I would absolutely love to hear from people. I'm so excited because people living in communities have such great ideas for what should be happening there. They often just need a key to unlock how they can make it happen. And I feel like there's so much more that we could be doing for each other, helping each other in communities, but also the Welsh Government can facilitate access to what people need to make their dreams, their visions happen in their community. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, would love to hear them.
Amy Nicholas, diolch yn fawr for being today's guest on Blueprint Cymru.
Diolch yn fawr.
If you enjoyed this conversation, have comments on today's topic, or would like to donate to keep the work of New Wales going, please head over to our website, which is a very easy one to remember as it's new.wales.